Most students make two common mistakes when they're trying to get the band score they need. First, a lot of students just hope for the band score they need, but they don't really know what they need to do to get that band score. Another one is not having a plan or just not preparing at all. And if you do that, that means you won't know what it takes to get the band score you want. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you a 7-step process you can follow to prepare for IELTS so you can get the band you need. But before we start, if you want a complete step-by-step guide to preparing for IELTS, my full course covers everything you need to know to get a band 7 or higher. It has strategies and methods for every single part, so you can walk into the real test with confidence and get the band you need. You can find the link in the description below. All right, let's get started with step number 1. Step 1, understand the test format. So before you start preparing for IELTS, you need to understand how the test works. It's not just about knowing English. You could be fluent and still get a low score if you don't know the format, timing, and what examiners are looking for. In IELTS, strategy and preparation are almost as important as your language ability. So let's have a very quick look at the 4 sections in the IELTS test. The first one is listening. The listening test is 30 minutes in total, and if you're doing the test on paper, you have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. There are 40 questions you need to answer. There are 4 parts, and you will have to listen to conversations and monologues on both everyday topics and academic topics. When it comes to reading, the reading test is 60 minutes in total. There are 40 questions you need to answer. There are 3 long passages that you need to read if you're doing academic IELTS. The texts are on different topics, and there is no time to transfer your answers at the end of the test. Let's move on to writing now. Writing is 60 minutes in total, or 1 hour. There are 2 tasks that you need to complete. For task 1, you need to describe a chart, table, process, or map if you're doing academic IELTS, or if you're doing general training IELTS, you will need to write a letter. For task 2, you will need to write an essay or an answer to a question. Let's move on to the final part now, which is speaking. Speaking is 13 to 14 minutes in total. There are 3 parts. The first part is where you have to answer general questions about yourself. A lot of students think that part 1 is just an introduction, but no, that's not true. Part 2, you need to speak about a topic for 2 minutes. It's like a mini presentation. And finally, in part 3, you will have a discussion with the examiner, and your topic for part 3 will come from your topic from part 2. So that was just the basics. If you want to do well in every single section, make sure you check out our preparation course. The link is in the description below. Step 2, find out your current level and the band you need. One of the biggest mistakes IELTS students make is not knowing their current level before they start studying. If you don't know your current band score and you don't know what band you need to get, you won't know what to focus on. You won't know where to spend your time. So you might be thinking, well, Shane, how can I know my current band score? Well, the best way is to take a full mock test under real exam conditions. You should use official IELTS practice tests because these are very similar to the real tests and they're going to help you to get your approximate band score. Now, for writing and speaking, you should get feedback from a real or a former IELTS examiner because a lot of people on the internet give advice about IELTS, but they're not real examiners or they're not former examiners, so they might not be giving the correct advice. And if you do need help with that, please contact us. You can find the link in the description below because we have former IELTS examiners on our team. Now, the next question is, how do you know the band score that you need? Well, if you're applying to university, it's pretty simple. You just need to check with the university itself and make sure you get all the details. So you need to know what overall band score you need, and you need to know what scores or minimum scores you need for each 4 parts of the IELTS test. For immigration, you can look up the IELTS score required for visas or check with immigration. I would recommend that you check with immigration themselves just to be 100% sure. And finally, if you need IELTS for work, well, you can check with the employer or the company. When you know your current level and your target band score, you can move on to the next step, which is step 3, create a study plan. Most students think they have a study plan, but in reality, they don't really have one. They just study randomly with no structure, or they just take practice tests again and again and again, and they don't learn anything from them. So when you are creating a study plan, you want to use most of your time, about 80%, on your weaknesses, which you should know because you've done a practice test already. And then you should use the remaining time, about 20%, on your strengths. So the things that you are good at. A lot of students do it the opposite way, and that's why they stay at the same band score for a long time, months or even years. So, how do you make a study plan? Well, it's pretty simple. The first thing you need to think about is how many hours do you have free each week? Do you have 5 hours? Do you have 50 hours? After that, you need to set the times when you study each skill, because if you want a high band score, then you need to perform well in all 4 skills. And of course, like I mentioned before, you need to remember to focus on your weaknesses. So here is a very basic example of what a study plan could look like. Monday, you study writing for 2 hours. Tuesday, you study speaking for 2 hours. Wednesday, you study reading for 1 hour. Thursday, you study listening for 1 hour. Friday, you study writing again for 1 hour. Saturday, you study speaking again for 1 hour. And then Sunday, you do a practice test or you have a rest. Now, this is just one basic example. It really depends on how much time you have free and what your weaknesses are. So for this study plan, the most time has been allocated to writing and speaking. So this is what you should do if your writing and speaking are weak. Okay, after you've created your own personal study plan, then you can move on to the next step, which is step 4, learn strategies for each section. To do well in the IELTS test, there are certain things that you need to be able to do for each skill. So for example, when it comes to writing, you need to know how to write an introduction. Now let me show you some things that you need to know which are going to help you to get the highest band score possible. Let's start with listening. The first thing you need to know is listening strategies. So you need to know what you're going to do to get the answers. The next thing you need to think about is how to answer each question type, because each question type might require a different strategy to get the answers correct. Reading is very similar. You need to know reading strategies to find answers as quickly and accurately as possible. And you also need to know how to answer each question type, because each question type requires a different strategy. When it comes to writing, you need to know how to write each paragraph. So for example, how do you write an introduction? How do you write a body paragraph? How do you write a conclusion? You need to know how to support your answers. This is particularly relevant for task 2, because if you want a band 7 or higher for task response, you need to support your answers. And finally, you need to know how to answer each question type, especially for part 2, where there are 6 main question types that you might get. And to answer each one correctly, you need to answer it a little bit differently. And finally, moving on to speaking, you need to know how long to speak for in each part. You need to know what examiners can and can't do. So for example, can they repeat questions? Can they paraphrase the question if you don't understand it? And finally, you just need to know how to give high-level answers. This is the same for writing as well. You need to know what a Band 7 plus answer actually looks like. What type of vocabulary do you need? What type of grammar do you need? So without all of these things, it's going to be really hard to get a high band score in the test. So if you do want to learn all of this and more in detail with step-by-step lessons and exam strategies, make sure you have a look at my complete IELTS course. You're going to get everything you need to be fully prepared, improve your weak areas, and feel confident on test day. The link is in the description. So after you've learned all of the strategies for each skill, then it's time to move on to the next step, which is step number 5, do practice tests. At this point, you should know all of the skills and strategies for each section, so you should start doing practice tests. But a lot of students do practice tests with no purpose in mind. So here are some things that you should do and some things that you should not do when doing practice tests. So, firstly, you should take the test with strict timing and no pauses or breaks, because in the real IELTS test, you cannot have a break between your listening, reading, and writing. You do them all in one go with no breaks. You should use official IELTS tests, because these are going to be very similar to what you get in the real IELTS test. And finally, you should analyze your mistakes. You should think about what you did well, and you should think about what you didn't do so well. And with the things that you didn't do so well, that's where you need to sit down and have a think about how you can do better for next time. Now, the things that you should not do include just take many tests without learning anything. A lot of students just keep doing practice tests again and again and again, but this doesn't really help unless you have a purpose in mind, unless you actually learn from them. Next, you should not only practice with the questions that you find easy, because these are the questions that you don't really need any practice with. You're already good at them. So if you only focus on the things that you're good at, you're probably not going to improve that much. And finally, you should not assume that just because you get a high score in a practice test means you're fully prepared. Some tests might be easier than others, and sometimes you might just get lucky and you might get topics that you know things about. Let's move on to step 6 now, which is focus on your weaknesses. So after you've done quite a few practice tests, you'll be able to see, number 1, what you're good at, and number 2, what you're not so good at. And one of the biggest mistakes that students make is just spending too much time on what they're already good at because it feels comfortable, but it doesn't actually help you to improve. So if you want a high score, you need to focus on your weaknesses. Now, let me show you some of the biggest problems that students have with each skill. When it comes to listening, one of the biggest problems that reduces students' band scores is incorrect spelling and not checking answers. I've seen this so many times where students get 3 or 4 questions incorrect because they got the wrong spelling or they missed something. For example, they missed an S or they missed an ED. And if you get 3 or 4 questions wrong because of things like this, it could reduce your band score by half a band or even more. So always be careful with spelling and checking your answers. When it comes to reading, a lot of students have an issue with understanding the difference between false and not given and no and not given. So make sure you learn that before you do your reading test. When it comes to writing, one of the simplest things to improve your writing band score is make sure you don't make any very basic grammar mistakes. For example, with your plurals or your singular nouns, with your ED, with your subject-verb agreement. And also, if you want to improve your grammar score, make sure you use a variety of structures and don't just use the same grammar again and again and again. And finally, when it comes to speaking, a lot of students just don't know how to get a band 7 plus. They don't know what type of vocabulary they need. They don't know what they need to do for pronunciation. They don't know what type of vocabulary they need to use. And if they don't know these things, well, it's probably unlikely they're going to get a high band score because they don't know what to do. So when you do know your weak areas, you can fix them and you can improve your band score. And after you do improve your weaknesses, it's time to move on to step number 7, which is take the test with confidence. After you have done some practice tests and you have got the band you need, it's time to take the real test. But before you do, let's quickly go over some last-minute tips to make sure you're fully prepared when you walk into your real test. So the first thing you need to think about is what to expect on test day. The first thing you should do is make sure you arrive early because you don't want to have any extra stress. You're probably going to be a bit stressed, a bit nervous, and if you arrive late, this is going to make things much worse. Make sure you bring your identification. This is really, really important, because the IELTS staff are going to check it and the speaking examiner will also check it. Make sure you follow test center rules. So for example, you cannot take your phone or your watch into the test room, and that includes when you're doing the speaking test and then when you're doing the listening, reading, and the writing. Now, on test day, make sure you manage your time really, really well. So for example, when it comes to listening and reading, don't get stuck on one question. If you don't know the answer, don't worry, don't panic, move on to the next one. Even if you get quite a few questions wrong, you can still get a band 7 or higher in listening and reading. When it comes to speaking, make sure you relax. Just relax. Do your best and try to be as natural as possible. Also, always remember to expand your answers. Remember, it's your job to show the examiner how good your English is. The examiner, he doesn't know you or she doesn't know you, so it's your job to show them how fantastic your English is. And to do that, when it comes to speaking, you need to expand your answers. And finally, don't worry if you don't understand something. Nobody is perfect, and if you don't understand something, it doesn't mean you're going to get a low band score. What's important is that you keep moving and always do your best. So for some people, taking the IELTS test is very stressful, but if you follow these tips and you stay focused, it's going to be less stressful and you're going to give yourself the best chance to get the band score that you need. Now, if you do need a step-by-step plan for how to prepare for IELTS, make sure you check out our IELTS preparation course. The link is in the description below. Good luck with your studies, keep studying hard, and take care.